This podcast is a Uniting Heart and Soul production and was recorded on land that was stolen nearly 250 years ago. Filthy Hope was conceived and dreamt on Gadigal and Birrabirragal country. We acknowledge these peoples as the traditional owners of these lands, and we extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We here at Filthy Hope pay homage to the ancient and ongoing traditions of storytelling when we share stories on this podcast. Welcome back to Filthy Hope, a podcast that untangles the grey spaces where Jesus, life, religion and culture intersect. If you're joining us for the first time, I'm your host, Jonty Cornford, and I'm usually joined by the Reverend Vanessa Williams-Henke on this show. This week, the two of us are joined by the Rev Jon Owen, CEO of Wayside, and is taken from our first live event. If you want to be involved in our live events, there's a link down below that will tell you everything that you need to know how to get involved. Just a heads up, this episode touches on topics of possession and demonic activity, so if that's something that you're sensitive to, this might be one to skip over. Enjoy the episode. Hello, welcome to Filthy Hope Live, the very first one. We're here with a live audience for the first time.
Nice. Look at them all, Jonty.
Absolutely, there's so many beautiful people.
They're a good-looking bunch.
And we are also super blessed to have Jon Owen here in the building with us. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, give it up for Jon Owen. Woohoo!
Do you mind just maybe for the people here in the room and the people watching or listening later, just introducing yourself to everyone? Who are you? What do you do?
Right, I'm Jon Owen, and I am the husband of Lisa, who is amazing. You don't know, that's not Lisa, it could be. If you were married to me, you wouldn't be, woo! It's like, oh, God. And the father of a few beautiful human beings, and also the part-time owner of 3 dogs, Sophie, Jessie, and Kiki. And I'm also involved in ministry at the Wayside Chapel and have been for about 5 or 6 years now, 7 years. Oh my goodness, a long time. And it's also, before that, I was working in an organisation called Urban Neighbours of Hope, which is a Protestant missional order that took on lifestyle commitments of simplicity, service and obedience, and was there for about 20 years. Before joining Wayside. So also was involved with the Uniting Church out in Bidwell in Mount Druitt as well in that time.
So you're a reverend. You're Reverend Jon Owens.
I am, yes. Yeah. I have become ordinized.
Yeah, ordinized.
Is that
oh, it sounds like a topping for a burger. Ordinized. Could I please have the ordinaise on mine? I love that. Yes. I've not heard that before.
Thank you, Possum. That's a reference to Barry Humphrey's passing as well.
Good. So. Oh, bless his soul. Yeah. So a deacon in the Uniting Church, I believe.
Yes. So the highest form of ordination. No.
No, say it, because there's lots of Rev brothers and sisters here that are ministers of the word. Go, Jon, say it. Go. Right. Ordinate yourself off the planet. Go.
No. So we began the process with a period of discernment, just to bore the listeners from home, which is a fascinating thing that Janet here is in the middle of a period of discernment where you begin this courtship process. And it was through that much to my terror, really sensed there was a call for ordained ministry within the Uniting Church, and kind of sat with my group of peers and said, I hope you're not hearing what I'm hearing. Unfortunately, they all said, yeah, we're hearing the same thing. So, and I really do feel strongly that a call to serve is a call to prepare and a call to be accountable and in community. And so it's been great. That journey has been a really fun one to get a whole new tribe around you, because the understanding of call in the Uniting Church was very healing and releasing for me, because previously in the Protestant tradition I grew up in, a call was something that was on your life for a very specific but finite amount of time. So you are called to Cambodia, in 1993, and once that finishes, your call's over. Right. Whereas actually the understanding of lifelong vocation was really an empowering one, because when the previous ministry came to a close after 20 years, I thought, is that it? Is God done with me? And realised that, no, that story's only still being written. So it was really lovely to find a tribe that had an understanding of call and vocation that was a lifelong one.
And is that how you actually came into Wayside, John? Is that how that part intersected? You finished with the previous group, and then did you get employed at Wayside? I don't know part of that story.
So there's a kind of a weird story that led me to Wayside, and so when Lisa and I first came up to be in ministry in Sydney, we were with Urban Neighbours of Hope, and we started a new team out in Mount Druitt back in 06, 07. And so as we were coming up, we were making some phone calls, because Urban Neighbours of Hope really is passionate about sending small teams into communities that are often marked by bad reputations and disadvantage, and instead of kind of driving in and doing an outreach kind of ministry, is we move into those communities and open our doors and we say, God, where are you at work? And I vividly remember someone saying to me, don't be so arrogant to think that you are bringing hope and bringing God into this community. Rather, your task is to sit still and listen to where the whispers of the Holy Spirit have been in existence in the land into which you've been called. Yeah, wow. Love that.
I love that too.
Beautiful. It's not my quote. And so that's what we did. And so we began, but we first of all began by kind of ringing up a few friends saying, from our old tribe, saying, look, where's the places that people would rather avoid? And so it was two things that really led us to Mount Druitt. One was about 20 years ago, an Aboriginal couple prayed over us and had a bit of a word and said, we really can see that you will be in relationships with some members of the Aboriginal community in Australia. And then it was also the driving tour that we had. We said, where does no one want to live? And so Graham Long is a friend of ours from the Churches of Christ tribe back in the day. And so we said, I'll show you all the places no one wants to be. And so we went for a drive through Campbelltown and Mount Druitt. And then it was separately, Lisa came up with a few friends, and we were both working out Auburn, Campbelltown, Claymore, Mount Druitt, and we were both kind of praying through it separately. And we both drove into Bidwell Square, and we both really felt Lisa heard a voice say, this is the place, and I kind of had this sense that this is where you will lay down roots, and that's where we ended up raising our children.
Amazing. It's incredible. Yeah.
To paint, I guess, a more textured picture for some of our listeners, what day to day, what does your work at Wayside kind of look like? Because I find every role that I've been in, the job title and the job description is one thing, but the actual day to day nitty gritty job often is much more specific and much more textured. So I guess what does a day at work look like for you at Wayside?
So I love that there's no standard day.
That's awesome.
To the week. And every morning there's my diary day, and then there's my day in reality. And so we never know kind of what's going to happen in that time. And the space to be surprised and to have the diary intruded upon is one of the beautiful things about ministry. So I'm the CEO of technically an organisation that has 140 employees, and with a strategic plan and a mission, vision, values that we're always trying to make sure is being inculcated through the place that does amazing work in the communities in which it's located. And so there's a very practical budget, planning, phasing, blah, 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 stuff, management aspect to it. And then there is my work as a pastor in that community. And so that can be hospital visits, and a member of our congregation maybe in hospital, so we'll go and visit them. Someone is moving into a house for the first time after sleeping rough for a few years. So we get to be a part of helping them move in and helping kind of light a cake with some candles and say, hey, this is awesome. So I get to do the best of everything, and sometimes it's super mundane, and other times it's like super what the heck's going on. I like to be in a role where at least every few months I go, what the hell is happening here? And me and Ness, we had a bit of a shared experience. You want to talk a bit about that?
It was a huge day, wasn't it? I mean, I think and Julie Ryan is in the audience today, and you know Julie as well. She's our psychologist from Wellness HQ at Uniting Heart and Soul. So I got a phone call from John. Do you want to? You start, and I can fill in the bits where I intersect with your day. Really? Oh dear.
So, there's this really important discipline as a minister to empower others, so you can not only release them into their gifts, but you can take a Sunday off, right? And so...
How does that work again?
Yeah, well, this is the example. So one Sunday I just said, hey guys, let's not have church, but a few of them said, I think was it New Year's Day?
Yeah,
was it a Sunday this year, New Year's Day? And I'm like, have a picnic together, right? Guys, nick off. I don't want to come into church. Just enjoy some time with your families. And a few people said, no, we'd really like to have church because we have no life. No, they didn't say that, right? But so they still wanted to have chapel. So I said, okay, 2 of you have the keys, knock yourself out. I'd rather you didn't go there, but just do it, all right? I'm going to be sleeping in. And then I get this phone call later that afternoon on the first saying, something happened. I said, oh no, what happened? And it was nothing usual. A beautiful young lady walked in and wandered in off the street and just kind of mentioned, oh, can I worship with you? I'd love to. I also am possessed by demons. And all of a sudden, in the middle of a little Bible study where everyone was having cups of tea and scones, kind of broke out into this trance-like state and was screaming in a different language.
Yeah.
And and it was quite, we were quite distressed, the members of the congregation.
So you thought you'd ring me, mate?
Pastorally, I said, I told you so.
Yeah.
Right? And you shouldn't have opened the doors. No. I
and
said,
thought,
Ness, help, what's going on?
NRMA, give Vanessa a call. She'll know what to do with crazy people.
Mate, I've had police, I've had ambulance, I've had knives, I've had bloodshed in my chapel services. I won't bat an eyelid, but I had no idea what was going on in this place.
And so you rang me.
Yeah, I did.
And we got together with this beautiful blonde bombshell that I called the Divine Miss M. And she is just the most phenomenal chick. But it was a real stretch. It was out of my training scope. I hadn't trained on how to manage the demonic in any setting other than what I'd seen in my Pentecostal days. I wasn't frightened by it. I was, I felt okay in the space most of the time. I wasn't frightened by the demonic. I think having a childhood that I've had, where I've been exposed to demonic crap, I recognised it, and so, but I wasn't frightened by it because I knew God was bigger and greater and scarier than any demonic shit that we were confronted with on that day. And yes, so she came and she was initially on her very best behaviour, and she met with me and with John was there. She came with her dad, and she was great at the start, wasn't she? Everything just seemed very normal, and I wondered what you were on about, brother, until she launched into one of Jonty's favourite books is The Exorcist. Yep. You remember the movie with Linda Blair? Has anybody seen that? Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was like that. It really was. It was other than her head didn't turn around, it was one of those moments, and it was really stressful to be in that because I could see her pain. We could see her pain. And I don't know if I'd signed up for that on that day. I had other things I had to be doing in my to-do list as well. And so it was a very unique experience, wasn't it, for both of us.
Yeah,
and
look,
for her.
I had Facebook notifications to get back to. So important stuff like that.
Yeah, it was pretty full on, actually.
Yeah, and we had, that was, apart from it was one of those moments where you go, what the hell's happening? Thank you, God, I love this job.
Yeah, yeah.
It is also that moment we say, wow, something new is happening here. And it's not waiting for my cognition of it, it is happening. So how do we really, I like those experiences because they force us to say, come Holy Spirit.
Yes.
Something has to happen here because I'm just a vessel here trying to create some space for you to work.
Yeah, it was so biblical, wasn't it? It was just any of those biblical verses that we read about where there's the demonic, and it felt very much like that. And I suppose if we cut to a couple of months, Julie Ryan, our psych at Wellness HQ, bless you, Jules, shout out, and a team at Dayspring Church and your team over at Bondi Wayside. We did like this collaborative team approach to helping the Divine Miss M. And the beautiful story about her is that she is now in Bible college.
Yeah.
It's like a amen, thank you, God. This woman is now getting healing and wholeness and healing. It's just feels amazing. And I said to John as I arrived here today, I got a text from her, at 10:56 p.m. last night. I was asleep, but she often rings me at that time and leaves me a message. So it's wonderful.
Beautiful. We worked well together.
Yeah, we did.
Most of my pop cultural references come from the 90s, so it was like that movie Tango and Cash, right? Where
you and me.
Yeah. So or good cop, bad cop, or
we did
bad
all right.
Cop, worse
yeah,
cop.
I think
And
it was when
worked.
she was grinding against your leg and kind of saying, "I'm not going to." I'm a bit worried that I might, I felt like any moment she was going to drop her boobs out into your face or something like that. I was a bit nervous for you, and I was glad that I was kind of a chick in that space. I could actually see. In college, we used to hear all the time, and my revs in the audience will talk about it. They give you all that training on vulnerability as being a minister and what that looks like. And I remember thinking, no one's ever going to hit on me. I'll be fine, love, I'll be fine. But to watch this in front of me happen to you was I was shocked, really shocked by that. And I'm so not a prude, if you know my story. I was just shocked that it was actually what they taught us about was happening right before my eyes.
I've just watched The Last King of the Cross with Lisa, and that cross is not the cross I'm currently in. And I was just saying I'm so disappointed that I've only seen 3 boobs in 7 years, and they're all from a bloke, right? So, total recall.
It's not often an odd number, is it,
So,
usually?
That's right. All from Taz. Sorry, which one are we talking about, Janet?
Resurrection are we talking about?
No, sorry. Which story?
Oh, the one about the very unhappy person who was brought back to life.
Oh, yeah. Yes, so recently we had someone just walk in off the street. We'd never seen them before, and they collapsed and died, just overdosed, and their heart stopped beating. So my team just kind of ran into action mode and were pumping away at his heart and doing everything they could and trying to clear the space for the ambulance to come, and people were still eating, right in front of this guy, and they're saying, get out of the way, and he's like, no, I still have 2 bites of my toastie to go, and he came back to life and he was not happy. No, so we call him Grumpy Jesus, So
Well, he was not happy because he's paid a lot for a hit, I'm thinking.
he's like,
Yeah.
you guys just spoiled my fentanyl buzz.
That's how real life Lazarus moment. That was huge.
Yeah, I don't think Lazarus was that happy. He was like, I'm a
Probably
bit smelly,
not.
guys,
Yeah.
in a few rags.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
What I do love about the Lazarus story, to get a bit theological, is they needed to unbind him. The community needed to unbind him, right? Up until that moment, he was the freak that had been resurrected, but it was not until the community got around him and unwrapped him and and welcomed him back into society did he move towards wholeness again.
Yeah, wow.
I think we have a role as church communities to unwrap some of those labels, because so often it's tempting to take a snapshot of a person and call it the whole movie. and say you're a
100%.
heroin user, or welcome, this is Vanessa, the ex-heroin user. And you're like, that's not who she is now.
No, that's right.
How do we redress each other in the most healthiest of ways to move towards our new identity as someone beloved in community with Christ and each other?
So right, John. And I think of Divine Miss M, and then segueing now into our topic of loneliness, because I know you've got huge passion about loneliness. I watched her with her demonic she had a team of demons, yet she was critically lonely because nobody would want to be in her presence because she was so shit scary, John, to be around. You know, I had one moment with her where she shot fiery darts into my eyes. I had to get some deep prayer after that because I was so rattled by what happened and how she was saying that Satan, you know, it was just awfully stressful. So it'd be hard to maintain friendship with her, wouldn't it, when you're having experiences like that? Or if you've got your partner and she's, you know, wanting to sit on his face or whatever's going on there.
Oh, you and I actually were able to identify with her and in conversation with the different manifestations. Gee, we've gone into a weird place, haven't we?
I love it.
This discussion. But one of the reasons I call Ness is I rang up Synod and I said, who's as crazy as me? And they went, there's someone crazier and she's just down the road, right? She'll help.
She'll know what to do.
Yeah, so that's how we had this conversation. We actually got to a point where in conversation we were acknowledging the role that these different manifestations and personas played in this young person's life, which was after an upbringing of severe neglect and abuse, was to protect her. And they had performed a good role, but they had left her incredibly lonely and isolated and disconnected. And it was time to begin the long, slow walk and work of thanking them for the role they played, but also excusing them and saying, it's not excusing them as in trying to let them off the hook, but just saying, you've played a wonderful role in this person's life, but now there's a stronger, more powerful force that wants to get involved in relationship here to move you forward.
Yeah. Yeah, she had all sorts of broken attachment stuff going on psychologically, didn't she? And she needed to reattach in wholesome ways to people that wouldn't abuse her, wouldn't take her for granted, wouldn't want to pay her for sex, who would just want to love her for who she is. And I just thank God for the work that God did in her life. And we were able to point her. We worked as a community, really, didn't we? And we did, I think, some of the best work of the church because we didn't hold it and think that we could manage it on our own. You reached out to me, I reached out to Dayspring. Dayspring hooked Julie and I with other people, and then the next place that she's gone, the next church, has done another work. So it's been this beautiful moment of God people in a really wide community coming together to love her into healing and wholeness. So it's a great story. And I think I keep saying to her, I say, Miss M, babe, love, hun, I want to write the foreword to that book because you're going to write a kick-ass novel one day and a story of your life. Because one thing that we failed to say is that she actually comes from a very famous family. And I think that was shocking to know that and to know that story because you only read you only know what you know about that family from the tabloids, and it was a very different story and a family that you would think would have everything because they've got all the trappings of the world that we think, the money, the cars, the schools, the stuff, all the things, and yet she was left this broken vessel. Yeah?
I think being in life is one of the tasks of life is to realise that, particularly in ministry, is that there are, what's that old saying? There are some that the church has that God doesn't, and there are some that God has that the church doesn't.
Yeah.
And to be able to recognise the work of the Spirit in whose lives, and to be able to maybe sometimes even call out where it's not at work in others.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's really significant as well that in that case it wasn't an individual, it was a community of people
Yeah.
that were working in community together to bring healing to this person's life.
100%.
Which just speaks to, we can get into this, that if there is an antidote to loneliness, whatever that is, I don't know, but my guess would be it would have a lot to do with community.
Well, we always find ourselves at our best when we realise that we are necessary, significant, but not central to what's happening. That our life isn't about us, but we can be about life. And when we take ourselves out of that centre, we can begin to be freed up and released into the larger picture of what God's doing in this world, about where life is to be found in this world. And we can take the pressure off ourselves to maintain the perfect exterior and just to be free to participate in what's actually happening in the real and in the now.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because
Okay.
that's what we do at Filthy Hope, Jon Owens. It's a bullshit-free zone.
Yeah.
I'm the radically honest minister and we don't bullshit. We try not to, don't we, Jonty?
No, radical honesty, that's the...
Yeah, that's how we
But
roll.
when Ness phoned me, I just decided that I was never going to step foot in a church again 2.5 years ago. She said, hey, do you want to come and lead worship at a church? No. And she said to me, like, I'm just going to be radically honest with you. I think God's called you into this place. And then since then, it's literally just been radical honesty every step along the way. So yeah, that's translate into no bullshit. It's pretty
you were
straightforward.
so friggin' hard work, mate.
I
get
kicked
you
and
on board.
screamed the
Yeah.
whole way, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. But we can get into that another
That's
time.
another podcast.
Yeah, that's another one. This is probably a really difficult question to answer, but I guess, can you point to any broad causes or catalysts that you've come across that are often the cause of loneliness? Is there any one thing that you can point to culturally or societally, or whether it's like to do with the infrastructure of like the healthcare system or things? I don't even know. Like, what do you see as some of the causes of loneliness?
You got time for a 10-minute rant?
Yes.
Oh,
All right,
please, yeah.
Sorry, guys.
Strap in, everyone.
Pour yourself a wine, grab yourself a cheese. So it's been happening progressively for a couple of 100 years, I would suggest. It kind of came home vividly when 25 years ago, when Lisa and I first got married. We had our honeymoon in Calcutta and we went to Mother Teresa's Home for the Dying, and your safety WH&S briefing lasts about 5 seconds. They're like, these people are dying, try not to kill them, and that's kind of it. That's all the guidance you're given. And
No pressure.
Yeah, it was. So we volunteered in the Home for the Dying in the mornings and an orphanage in the afternoons. And in the Home for the Dying, you would see these. You'd be given these people who were 20 or 30 or 40 kilos at the end of their adult lives, emaciated, often dismembered, disfigured by family members, to beg on the streets. And these nuns were given this room in the temple of the goddess of death, Kali, and you could go there and volunteer and just to love them in the last moments of their life. And I was in the middle of practicing my Bengali on one of them, and a nun came up and kicked me in the leg, and she said, what was our one rule? Try not to kill them, right? You are terrible at that language, And I said, that's very rude. Right? She said, you don't speak Bengali. He doesn't speak English, and it's clear you don't speak Bengali. So she said, how about this instead? She said, make sure every action and interaction you have with this man in the last moments of his existence on this planet, communicate to him that he is loved, right? That he is not going to where he is going next alone. I thought, gee, that's a good philosophy on life. And then it was in the afternoons at the orphanage where one of the nuns got into conversation with her, and she told us most of the children there are not orphans, but their families can't feed them, so they put them in there while they get well, and then they get a job. But some of the other orphans are ones they find at the train stations, and because of poverty, many are abandoned on that train station because of usually sexual assault, and the shame and the way families still in some parts of the world have permission to kill you if you bring shame upon them. And so she said every morning we run around the station and we run fast because there are gangs also looking for those kids. And she said if we find them, it's a miracle. You know, that's why we wake up and we run every day. If we find them, they come here, they're loved, they're educated, they're raised, they're fed. Many of the women become nuns, others work in our cottage industries, and they have a life. Otherwise, they end up where you go in the mornings. And so it was in that context that I was reading some of the philosophy of Mother Teresa, and she said that, you guys in Australia and Sydney and New York and London, you need me more than any of these lepers in Calcutta. I thought, what the heck does she mean? I've been there, I've seen it. And then she said this, she said, loneliness is the leprosy of the West. Is there anything worse than the feeling of being unloved or unwanted? Poverty isn't just about a lack of cash. It's having a lack of hope. It's a lack of belief that anything could be any different. Yeah. The Western world has a way of constituting us as lonely, as disconnected individuals. We didn't vote for it. We didn't ask for it. Our education system, 98% of us finish high school feeling like we're a failure. We're set against each other, and some of the systems and the structures we have designed out of the great knowledge of the Enlightenment to deal with it. Often, we walk in, and as Aussies, we don't normally ask for help, do we? And so if we do have the courage to actually reach out, what do we often get met with is, a clipboard or prescribed a pill or a program or a pamphlet, and on your way, and you think, what a waste of time. Why did I even bother, reaching out? Or we walk into a church and we get someone downloading to us from a what are those little? Do they still hand them out?
I don't hand out anything except lollies. What do you
lollies,
mean?
but you stand on the side of the road and they give you a little cartoon book or something, with four
Jesus
spiritual
loves you.
laws. You get one of them. What were they called? Pamphlets? I don't know. Tracts.
Oh,
that's
I don't
the
know
one.
about that.
I just had a. Yes. So you get a hand, why did I even bother here? And so, that's where we found ourselves, and the last few years of lockdown have only exacerbated that sense of loneliness. And so we've found ourselves as the opposite to the movie The Matrix, right? At least there we were little 8-volt batteries pumping out energy into the system. We've become these units of not production but consumption. Yeah. We sat in apartments disconnected from each other thinking, who will notice if I live or die?
Yeah.
I'm in Potts Point.
Yeah.
And that is one of the most financially most affluent suburbs in Australia, probably the world. And yet I was talking to a real estate agent and he was saying it is not uncommon for us to find people who have been dead for weeks and weeks and weeks in their houses. Yeah. Just completely and utterly alone.
I had a Google search on Black Dog Institute and had a little look, and the stats during pandemic was that 1 in 3 people in the world suffered from loneliness in that time. And loneliness really affects our health as well. I was surprised about that. The stats on that...
Can I give you some good news?
Yeah.
It's actually... They've done some longitudinal studies on our health and the impact it has on us, where we report loneliness. And loneliness is different to solitude, right? In fact, Henri Nouwen's book, one of the movements he names is from loneliness to solitude. We need time away. I'm a raging extrovert, so I need a break to recharge so I can be generative again. But the health impacts they've found is, they say it's better to be well connected in a community, smoke half a pack of cigarettes and drink a bottle of wine a night than it is to be lonely and eat quinoa.
Wow.
That's the good news. No. That's into the lesson. No. Wouldn't tell anyone that.
Wow.
So John is well on the way there, I can see, with the wine.
Yeah, that's extraordinary. They say it like loneliness affects our blood pressure, cholesterol levels, mental health.
Well, they say loneliness is the new smoking is one of the other phrases. And it's highest, actually, apart from some of the older cohorts, not as it's quite low in some old cohorts, but the highest cohort is about 28 to 40. And a lot of young people have moved into Sydney, for professional careers right in the middle of lockdowns.
Yep.
But the other thing around loneliness is, I think, with the anxiety that many people are experiencing and exacerbated mental health, not only through lockdown but even post-lockdown, is we used to grow up in tribes around kinship and relationship, and we have very much moved from one of the great contributions of the Hebrew Scriptures to us is the guilt and shame. The guilt culture is we say, okay, what have I done wrong? How do I make amends with myself, with God, with others? Whereas we've moved back into the old shame and honour culture, which is fine. Shame and honour is in many traditional cultures, but the purpose of shame and honour was after the exclusion was the embrace. Whereas now we don't have those tribes that embrace us anymore. What was the worst punishment in a shame and honour culture was exile. You would be kicked out of your tribe. What do we call that now in Australian society? Cancel. You will be cancelled. They'll find a photo of you from 35 years ago, and then all of a sudden, I cannot hang out with you. We cannot spend time. We've lost that ability. We've strengthened the ability to exclude, but we've lost the ability to embrace. So I can see even in my own children this panic around who am I? I don't want to define myself too narrowly in case I'm excluded from any group or in case I get kicked out of any group. Yeah. Where would I belong? I'll be cut adrift. So it's taken an issue with loneliness and it's exacerbated it even further. We're in pretty choppy waters at the moment, I would say.
And even like we're talking about the pandemic, but I probably think even well before that with social media, I can't imagine that that's helped this... I guess we call it a pandemic of loneliness. If it's the leprosy of the West, like I don't know, would you have any comments on how social media affects that? Because it's just this constant refreshing of who you're projecting yourself to be, as opposed to who you are and being present amongst the people around you, right?
I mean, if it's done anything, social media has accelerated the mistrust that we have for ourselves and the contempt in which we hold ourselves, hasn't it? And where's the value? Where's the value in that? We say everyone else must be having this great life. I am pretending to have a great life, but I miss out on the ability to be able to be me and to be able to share with a close set of friends instead of projecting to them at every moment and broadcasting to them who I think they want me to be or need me to be.
And because we're built for connection, we're projecting these lives that aren't real in the hope that others will then connect with us. So then we get that reinforcement loop of, oh, I'm needed, I'm loved, I'm connected, I'm attached to something. Even if it's some famous person that you don't even know. They want those likes. They want that constant feedback. It's really frightening. So bloody sad.
Because I think when you're in community with people, I think one of the joys of being in community is you're constantly receiving a really positive level of affirmation.
Or not.
In good cases of community, right?
But even in here we're going to have an argument now. Look
great,
at us
let's
go.
do it.
So, not always, Jonty, is it? It's not. You would hope that it would be a good thing and a good feedback, but I've recently had some negative feedback. And it was at church after Easter. I was slammed for something that happened, and it was like, wow, man, shit, I was not expecting that. It's like bam, came out of the blue. And it was really hard to handle. So it's not always positive, is it?
Oh no, for sure. But I think when you're receiving affirmation that you are loved and needed and wanted in community, I think in a social media, and I don't want this to come across as I'm a fuddy-duddy that hates social media. Of course I'm on social media, but like when we're on social media and we're receiving that feedback loop, it's not to who we are, it's to our digital profile. And that, in my experience, is not, like, doesn't even come close to the real thing of being in community with people. It's not a replacement for, it's a extension of,
look
right?
at them
We have
go.
two hands up. John,
it's
go
so
first.
good.
Hey guys, just quickly interrupting the show to tell you a little bit about our live events. On the last Saturday of every month, we're hosting live recordings of the show, at which our audience are encouraged to interact with us and our guests and ask questions. There's also live music, free food and drink, and just overall a great opportunity to gather in community. If you're interested in coming along to one of these events, follow the link down below to check out when and where the next one will be. That's all, and now back to the show.
That's exactly what the point in Black Dog says. It's about getting onto collaborative forums where you can help one another.
And as a grumpy old man, I am in a different scenario where I have a wonderful job, a wonderful family, and a wonderful opportunity to make a difference in a community. And the only thing that social media can do is steal that away from me. Right? I don't need affirmation from social media, but I've felt the pull of that world at various times. Like I remember when my kids first got on social media, I said, whatever you post, I'll get twice the likes. you know, that kind of, so that scared them off social media, thankfully for 5 minutes. But, it would rob me of my sustained focus into people. I think there's a lot more ADHD being diagnosed now because our focus has literally been stolen, as that book is, and divided by 6-7 beeps at a time.
Yeah. And one of the things that I get, it was a random book choice to go on the set, but I love this book. If you haven't read it, I'll lend it to you. Is this myth that people can multitask. It's actually like the brain can only focus deeply on one task at a time, and we've trained ourselves to think that we can multitask. What we can actually do is focus on 4 or 5 things at the same time at a much shallower level, and I think that is the same for relationships, right? I know I've fallen for this trap often. We try and spread ourselves so thin to be there for everyone all at once, and the further you spread yourself, the thinner that relation can be, I think.
And look, if you want to if that's how you want to roll your work life, knock yourself out, have 58 buzzers and beeps, you're not going to do a great job. But let's transfer that into the human realm, and let's be aware of neurodiversity. So some people have some different ways of interacting. But how often do you have a conversation with someone and their heads are down in a phone, or your head is down in a phone, or there's a buzz or a beep or a vibration, and all of a sudden you've lost that sustained focus? And as people who are committed to sharing time and space and presencing with others, every microsecond you lose is a withdrawal from an opportunity for a transformative moment to occur.
Amen.
I don't remember the name of the philosopher, but there's this theory around this thing called non-spaces, which came about with the kind of the advent of places like airports and shopping malls and places that people kind of transition through, but they don't actually, there isn't a sense of place. And I have this really strong sense that in my life, social media has been serving as this really great distraction from being in place. It's almost like this new non-place that we carry around in our pockets. Yeah.
And look, that kind of place-based spirituality it is not new. It's a nice new fancy phrase, but it's about being rooted somewhere, having your roots deeply in the soil, whereas at the end of modernism and the postmodern era, we've come to a point where, we can say, hey, did you catch what's happened in Albania 2 minutes ago? And it's important, but is it important, really, honestly? And look, I think back on the times I've been held by others really beautifully, and Jenny's here, and she's held me through some pretty dark times in my life. And I could imagine if those interactions she was on her phone, if she was on her phone half the time, I'm not sure we would have gotten to the places that we've gotten to. So if I ever try and spend time with someone, I try, and people who regularly spend time with me know I fail mostly, is to turn the phone off. To be able to give that sustained attention and focus to 100%. What God might be up to in that moment.
Yeah, 100%. Nothing shits me more as the girls sit down to dinner, my daughters sit down to dinner on their phone. It's like I would say an expletive word there, and the next word would be off. I'd say that blanks. Off.
Yeah.
Phone's off.
That's right.
Whatever. Big chickens.
we've been going for quite a while. This is fantastic. Just to transition this over to a slightly different place, I'd love to ask you where, in your experience, churches have played both positive and negative roles in aiding this pandemic of loneliness. Because I've had really positive experiences in church spaces around this. I've also had negative experiences around this. So I'd be curious to hear what you have to say about that.
Yeah, so admittedly, I've kind of been on the outside in of standard churches for 2.5, 3 decades now. But where I see there's power, particularly in communities such as the ones we find ourselves broadcasting from, but also where we are, is where we're rapidly losing green spaces, we're rapidly losing third spaces. You know, not your house, not my house, but a place that we can gather and a place that we can meet and connect. And so that's where I think churches play a powerful role, particularly within the life of communities. We used to be the biggest building in the centre of town and now we're just one amongst many, but we still hold, even in real estate, these key locations where we can re-find our places not of exclusion but one of radical inclusion and welcome, particularly for, you know, in Potts Point, Kings Cross, everyone's paying way too much money to have overcrowded apartments, and we can be that place where people can meet for a coffee. We lost it through the lockdown, but we're trying to rebuild it. We used to have a toddlers play group, and when Sydney throws up a 4 or 5 day or in a row rainstorm, is some of those parents would say, you don't know how important this play group is to me, with 3 toddlers under 8 in a 1-bedroom apartment, kind of killing me. And so they're the little points along the way. We also provide great opportunities, and churches do this, to serve others. And that can be at Wayside, at giving out socks and undies in love. And I think that really pulls people out of their own headspace and gets them into service. We have, you know, you will find quite prominent people in Sydney volunteering at Wayside. And the reason they like to do that is because no one judges them on who they project themselves to be. Rather, they only judge them on how kind they are to others in that moment. And that's a freeing, releasing gift for everyone involved in that transaction.
I love that. I guess a question that I have to move this to a close. The pandemic started in March of 2020. Every day we're getting further and further away from, I guess, or even closer to what people used to call the new normal, whatever that is. I guess whether in your job over at Wayside or just outside of that even, where do you sort of see God moving forwards into the future, and how do you see this topic that we've been talking about today developing or changing, or what do you see happening over the next 5-10 years in this space?
Yeah, great question. I think look, and to weave it in, I think the churches have a key role to play in this space. Is we have a society and an economy that is based on making us more and more anonymous. The more we can be picked off, the more we can be marketed to and sold products for. And so I think there is a deep craving for a return to community, a return to localised community. Why do you think that now the most powerful grounding places we have in our communities are our coffee shops? It's because it's where we have our morning, daily commitment to I love my barista. He is amazing at our local coffee shop, and I kind of sit back and watch him, and he has a powerful role to play in people's lives. So I say, why are you like this all the time? And he often says to me, he says 2 things. He said, 1, everyone's leading crap lives now. He said, when I see them, I smile, I call them by name, and if I can get them their coffee within 30 seconds, I just create the possibility that they might just have a good day. Yeah. And I thought, you're the best pastor in this community, mate. Yeah. And he has this daily interaction with them every single morning, and he can track them. How are you going? How's this kid? What's happening here? And people go there. And he also made this observation. He said, I can tell you half of these people that come here every day, I'm the only human communication point they have in the day with someone else, where they look them in the eye. And so where I look them in the eye and I smile and I dote over their kids. Otherwise, they're just back on Teams doing all that superficial crap, you know, saying, how are you? Oh, I'm good. How's this? How's that? No one cares in that space. We're just trying to get a job done.
Well, nobody tells the truth either.
So we can be those places. We should be those places. That's our mandate. People are dying and craving. We've had this beautiful work amongst young people, and every new intake, we would sit with them and we'd share our stories, and they would say to us, often they said, look, we present ourselves, this new young generation, mostly people in their teens through to their mid-20s, as being competent, as knowing it all together. We will never ask for your help or your advice, but we are craving it deeply. We're craving your love and your acceptance, and we've got questions. We're just never going to ask them out in public. So what more beautiful place can that be? I think every church should be forced to watch ABC's 2 series, the 4-year-old kindergarten, and the other one, what's the teenage? Yeah, teenage aged care. And we should say Old People's Home for Teenagers. The teenagers were more lonely and in need than the people, the residents in the house. We should watch that and then have a dreaming session together of saying, if they're writing the story of Double Bay in 10 years' time, what will they say about this place?
Yes.
What will the community say about us? And being in that one place, grounded, rooted, being a touchstone for people's lives. Wayside is so precious because it's 60 years. People say, my granddad was christened here, my grandma, and they come back to it. They find themselves at those key moments of life. As you would know, as I would know, I'm an atheist, but you're my pastor, because we are that safe touch point in their life.
It's amazing, John. Thank you for sharing with us today.
Yeah, I'm super grateful to have you. I guess, final question. What are you grateful for? I guess you must, I'm sure, run into... we just heard at the big, earlier, some of the crazy stuff going on in you and Ness's lives. What are you grateful for in the midst of all of this stuff?
And can I add to it? Where do you see hope?
Great question.
Filthy hope.
Yeah. I'm not so smart that I can recognise where God's at work in the moment. So I, 25, 30 years ago, began a discipline of journaling where I can look back. It's more that examen of conscience. Have you heard of that examen of conscience? There's a little story where there was an orphanage in World War II and they couldn't get the toddlers to sleep at night because literally in the Battle of Britain, the bombing of Britain, they'd gone to bed, their houses had been bombed, and the ones that survived, their parents were gone and they were wandering the streets at night. And they couldn't settle at night because that was such an experience of devastation and loss. And one of the women in the orphanage came up with the idea of giving each of the and many hadn't eaten for weeks, so many hadn't. So the idea they struck upon was giving each of them a little loaf of bread, just a little bun, and they cuddled it in and they fell asleep straight away, saying that if we know that we have bread for the next day, it will help us sustain ourselves and fall asleep in this day. So my bread, what's our bread, is the question is, I'll go back and I'll say, God, where the hell were you at work today? And there's 1,000 ways that I think if we all did it, we'd realise God is at work in many ways on every day. But, how do we take those key moments and distill them into bread? I have a practice and a discipline, long answer to a short question, on my apologies, is... at the end of the day, I light a candle and say, okay, God, I give myself 5 minutes to work out where were you at work today. There are some stories that have so much pain and are so inexplicable, I don't last longer than 5 minutes because if I try to make sense of them, it's disingenuous. There's still an ongoing story being written there, so I let it go. I don't try and go mental with trying to work it out. It's important to be able to let it go, but there are other moments that present themselves where you say, hey, that's where you at work. And then it asks me, the next question is, how can I participate in the work you are already doing in people's lives? So that journaling has now become a public weekly blog to 50,000 people. And so kind of distill the biggest moment of what's going on in that. And that helps sustain me. That is my practice that helps me be grateful. I also like to text people when I'm grateful. It makes a big difference to say, hey, I have this discipline, when you had a coffee with me, when you asked me about that was really important to me. This is a part of my gratitude practice. It makes people's lives, it's a small micro thing that can really make a difference. But I'm grateful for plenty of things. I'm grateful for the sun shining, for to have beautiful kids, to be really lucky to have a marriage that's still functional after 25, 30 years. In fact, I think is getting better. I'm now at the age where I go to weddings or adjudicate weddings. Adjudicate? Is that what they're called?
No, it's ordinise.
Referee weddings.
Isn't it ordinise?
You see these people walking down the aisle and you're like, you're so young. You're babies. You have no idea what you're about to get into. And, looking at often the bride's mum going, now there's a woman, right? But, just trying to, realising that, your marriage is so much better after 25 years. Yeah. You know what you're doing on so many levels.
Yep.
That sounds terrible.
Amen. Well, we're really grateful for you and your time because you're a very busy human ordinizing the world up there at Wingspan.
I have to go walk the dogs. That's my task this afternoon.
You can do it. We release you, brother, after this Q&A that we're not going to record.
Yeah, that's right. So for those listening at home or watching at home, we're going to love you and leave you. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together, please, for Rev Jon Owen.
Oh, thanks.
Thanks for listening. If this conversation resonated with you or rattled some of your cages, we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to get in touch on socials, or you can send us an email at filthyhopepod@gmail.com. If you want to support us, then that really would mean the world to us. And 5-star written reviews on Apple Podcasts are the easiest and best way to get this show in front of more sets of eyes. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, just by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Again, if you want to come to a live taping of the podcast, there's a link down below that will give you all the information that you need. We hope to see you there. Big thanks again to John for being so generous with his time. And whatever it is that you're up to today, thank you for spending your time with us. We'll see you next time. And remember, take Jesus seriously and don't be a dick.